basically write Joan out of your life. And Joan was furious at this and also angry that Betty gave in and agreed to these terms that Peter had made. Betty had allegedly told Joan that Peter was abusive, both physically and verbally, and that she just didn't want Betty in that situation anymore. Now, during the investigation, it reportedly only took police 2 weeks to find Joan's name and to kind of look at her name more closely in their investigation. They wanted to question her, they wanted to get more information out of her. But they did talk to Betty earlier on and asked her, who might be involved in your husband's death, who do you think wanted him dead, stuff like that. And she gave them Joan Rabel's name right away. That was the first name that she gave them. Now, when officers realized the backstory of Peter's reluctance to have the women spend any more time together, and the thought that they were together romantically, police thought that they had finally found a motive. The motive was a tale as old as time, the motive of jealousy. Police arrested Joan Rabel on November 16th, 1957. Now, while she was in their custody, they questioned her more specifically about her whereabouts the night of the crime. First, she told them that she was home all night. She said she never left her home, car never left the driveway, couldn't have been me, nope. However, when a neighbor was later questioned, said, hey, is this true? Did you see her leave? The neighbor said, actually, yeah, her car never left the driveway. But the neighbor mentioned that Joan had asked to borrow their car. And so when Joan returned it, the neighbor said that they looked at the odometer, and they noticed that she had traveled 57 miles with the car that night. So yes, Joan didn't take her car, but Joan left the house that night. So officers talked to Joan. They were like, hey, where'd you go? Why'd you leave? Why didn't you tell us that you left it in the neighbor's car? So they were kind of like, hey, what's up? Why didn't you tell us what was going on? And Joan was like, okay, I did leave the house. I lied when I said I didn't. I did leave the house. I did borrow this car, but I left that night because I had to go pick up groceries. Okay, Joan. We see you, Joan. One other thing to note is Joan Rabel repeatedly told officers that she never pulled the trigger. I never pulled the trigger. First she said she didn't leave. Then she said, okay, I left. Then she said, I never pulled the trigger. So, who did? Now, let's enter a woman named Goldine Pizer. Joan wanted Peter out of the picture for good. She was a woman scorned, and she wanted to get rid of him. And so she found the perfect person to do it, and that is Goldine. Real quick before I go into Goldine, police really didn't have much at the time to hold Joan Rabel, so they had to release her. But a month later, they caught a break, and they discovered the murder weapon. Someone, we don't know who yet, someone called police with an anonymous tip, and that tip led investigators straight to a locker, a rented locker in a department store, and in that locker, they found the .38 caliber weapon, and after some ballistics test on it, they found that this weapon matched the bullet that was in Peter's chest. So, Goldine Pizer, she was a 40-year-old woman who was described on multiple sources as a mousy individual, whatever that means. She was very quiet. She wasn't assertive like Betty or Joan was. She worked as a lab tech at the Los Angeles Children's Hospital. Police questioned her, and unlike Joan Rabel, Goldine confessed right away to having a part in Peter's murder. She confessed to police that she was the one who pulled the trigger, and she was the one who fired into Peter's chest, killing him. Goldine said that she didn't commit the crime all on her own, however, and that Joan was with her. And Goldine also said that Joan had such an emotional hold on her that she air bunnies forced her to kill Peter Fabiano. So in my research, a few articles talked about a lesbian triangle between Goldine, Joan, and Betty, Peter's husband. But a few articles I also found said that this wasn't true and that it was all made up just to get people to buy more papers, a juicier story. So take this claim that the two of them could have been lovers, or the three of them could have been like in this triangle where Joan loved Betty and she wanted Goldine to do the dirty work for her and get rid of Peter so that Joan could have Betty all to herself. I don't know if that's true. I can't substantiate it, but I do want to note it, because if this is true, this triangle makes sense, because it's curious, isn't it? Like, if jealousy or love isn't the motive, if that's not the motive, if that's not true, then what would have been the motive? Nothing was stolen from the house. It just gives me pause. And I find myself leaning more towards the theory of a scorned and jealous lover, set to get her lover's husband out of the way. But that's just a theory. Like I said, we don't have any proof. But with Goldine's testimony, police could finally go pick up Joni Rabel again and get her in custody. Goldine was not holding back. Everything that she had to say definitely incriminated Joan Rabel. She said that Joan called Peter, quote, an evil and vile man, a man who was destroying everything around him. She said he mistreated his wife and that he was dealing in narcotics. She told me that he was always bothering her at home, end quote. So Joan Rabel is just going on and on at her home about how much Peter Fabiano was just a horrible person, a horrible man. He's so evil. He's cruel to his children. He's cruel to his wife. He's a monster, according to the Daily News. He's a monster that needed to be destroyed. And also in this New York Daily News article, Goldine Pizer said, quote, Joan and I discussed killing Peter Fabiano many times. We were undecided whether we should use poison, a knife, or a gun, end quote. The girls finally decided to use a gun to get rid of him, and Goldine went and bought a .38 caliber revolver with money from Joan Rabel. And she told the person who she bought it from that she needed it for home protection. She only bought 2 shells at this store. She knew what she wanted to do. She didn't need a box of shells. And they staked out the home. They drove by multiple times. They wanted to know, where he lived, exactly where he was going to be at certain times of the day. And Joan Rabel also bought Goldine Pizer to his beauty shops a couple times in that month, so she would get familiar with him and get familiar with his mannerisms and what he looked like and this and that. So Joan Rabel was 100% getting Goldine. What's that word when you're warming someone up? It flew out of my brain, but getting her outfitted, so to speak. That's not the right word, but I just can't think of the word I'm trying to think of right now. But getting her conditioned, there we go, getting her conditioned for this, getting her ready mentally and physically with getting prepared on who this guy is, where he's going to be, what he looks like, stuff like that. Getting Goldine ready for this murder. Now, the night of the murder, Goldine says that her and Joan Rabel drove in that borrowed car, drove straight to Peter Fabiano's home, getting there around 9. She said that they waited in the car. They waited for about 2 hours until they thought that Peter and Betty were asleep. They saw the lights go out. And then Goldine said that Joan told her to go do it. So she had put her mask on. She walked up to the door. She said she was very scared. Her hands were shaking. She knocked at the door, and Goldine says, quote, I had to use the left hand to hold the right hand in order to pull the trigger, end quote. She said she was shaking. It was really hard to hold the gun, but that apparently didn't bother her. She hit Peter exactly where she aimed, right on, dead on, in the chest, and he died. Now, Goldine said that she rushed back to the car right after that, and she said Joan kissed her and said, quote, thank you, end quote. And that's where they went back to drop the car off. And instead of, say, thanks for doing this, I'm glad you did this, according to Goldine, Joan Rabel said, quote, forget you ever knew me, end quote. And that was kind of just Goldine's slap in the face to be what? Why are you saying this? It seemed to her that this was going to be Joan and hers breakaway story. Like, now that this guy was gone, the two of them could be together, according to her. And she just didn't find that fair. And so when police went to talk to Goldine decided to spill all. She was like, hey, it was not my plan. I did it because of Joan Rabel. Now, Goldine did do some more work after that. She cut up the costume she was wearing. She is the one who put the gun in the locker, and they found in that gun one of the two bullets still inside the chamber in that revolver. Now, Joan Rabel is charged with first-degree murder, and so is Goldine Pizer. And Joan Rabel pleads not guilty, and Goldine Pizer pleads not guilty by reason of insanity. Now, they decided to go for a plea deal for second-degree murder on March 11th, 1958, and this was kind of not a very popular deal. Everyone in the public thought they were just going easy, that they were going easy on because that they were women. They thought that they were just going to get away with it, but according to the article that I read, again, this Daily News article was amazing. It gave me a lot of details. Goldine was just so not believable, I guess. Like, she'd say one thing and then she'd bounce around to the other one. So it really seemed unlikely that a jury would convict her based on how all over the place she was, if that makes sense. Like, she was gonna get, she was gonna get the guilty sentence no matter what, but it was really unlikely that the jury was gonna find her insane. When she was later talking about the night of the murder, Goldine said, quote, I had no motive, personally. Whatever motive I had was to please Joan. I was always easily influenced. I had been impressionable and always trusting, end quote. Both Goldine Pizer and Joan Rabel were charged with this second-degree murder charge, and they were both found guilty and sentenced to only 5 years to life in prison. So, 5 years to life, that's so broad to me. But, 5 years to life, I guess. And Goldine Pizer was eventually released from prison. She was eventually released from prison, and she died in 1998 when she was 83 years old. We don't know a ton about her after she got out of prison, and we really don't know a ton about Joan Rabel either, but we assume, according to the article, the Medium article, quote, it's assumed that she was released from prison around the same time as Goldine, end quote. And so that's kind of where this case ends. And think to yourself, justice? I don't know. I don't really think so. That doesn't seem like enough time for murdering someone. But yeah. Now let's go to Betty. Betty Fabiano eventually sells her husband's beauty businesses. What is she going to do with them? And she later dies in 1999 in Palm Desert, California. Now, if you are a true crime fan like me, maybe you are thinking, did Betty have anything to do with this? Because, people are talking. People are saying that Betty and Joan were together. Did Betty know that Peter was going to die that night? Did she ask Joan to get rid of Peter for her? We're never going to know that. She was never charged with anything related to her husband's death. She never said anything about having anything to do with her husband's death, and it's unknown to this day. We do not know what happened. And I want to know what you think. Do you think Betty Fabiano had anything to do with her husband Peter's death? What do you think? Do you think Goldine Pizer was truly motivated by Joan Rabel to kill Peter? I mean, obviously, because she did. Do you think the two women should have been released as early as you? I want to know as early as they did. I want to know what you guys think. Tell me in the comments of any social media that I post about this. What do you think about it? Because I want to know your thoughts. All right, let's go into the second case now. I do want to include a trigger warning before this case, as there is mention of sexual assault. So I'm just going to include that trigger warning, and I will include another one when we get further in the case. All right, so now we are going to be talking about the case of Martha Moxley. Martha Moxley was born on August 16th, 1960.